The Alliance for Sahel States accused Nigeria of violating its airspace after a Nigerian military transport aircraft made an emergency landing in Burkina Faso.
And the Nigeria Air Force has debunked claims of the arrest of its aircraft and crew members for alleged airspace violation in Burkina Faso.
A Nigerian military plane carrying 11 soldiers just got detained in Burkina Faso.
Any aircraft that violates the airspace of the Alliance of all Sahel States will be neutralized or detained. The sovereignty of our states is non-negotiable.
The pilots are being held. The aircraft is grounded, and the Alliance of Sahel States just issued a chilling warning. Any unauthorized aircraft entering their airspace will be shot down.
Burkina Faso's actions towards Nigerian Air Force are legitimate and necessary. We must remain vigilant against external provocations and attempts at destabilization.
This happened 24 hours after Nigeria sent fighter jets into Benin to crush a coup, and now West Africa is closer to war than it's been in decades. On December 7, 2025, at 5 a.m., soldiers from Benin's National Guard launched coordinated attacks across Cotonou. They kidnapped head of the National Guard Faizou Gomina from Camp Togbin. They overpowered Army Chief of Staff Abou Issa at his home and took him hostage. Both senior officers were transported to Tchaourou and held captive. Then the rebels stormed the presidential palace. A firefight broke out between the mutineers and Republican Guard forces protecting President Patrice Talon. The rebels were repelled and retreated to the national broadcaster SRTB, where they took workers hostage and seized the television signal. At SRTB, 8 soldiers led by Lieutenant Colonel Pascal Tigre appeared on live television at dawn. They announced that President Patrice Talon had been removed from office as President of the Republic. They suspended the Constitution and all state institutions, calling themselves the Military Committee for Refoundation. They cited Talon's management failures, military favoritism, neglect of fallen soldiers and their families, deteriorating security in northern Benin, where jihadist attacks have surged, healthcare cuts, increased taxes, and restrictions on political activity. Videos of military vehicles speeding down Boulevard de la Marina spread across social media. For a brief moment, Benin's 35-year streak of uninterrupted democracy since 1991 appeared finished, making it the latest victim of West Africa's coup epidemic that has already toppled governments in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Guinea, and Guinea-Bissau in November 2025.
Béninoises et Béninois, bonsoir. Je suis le colonel Tigre Pascal. Depuis ce matin, nous avons lancé une opération qui consiste à libérer le peuple béninois de la dictature de Patrice Talon et des libertés qu'il a longtemps arrachées au peuple béninois.
But President Talon moved fast. Within minutes of the attack, Benin's government sent 2 urgent requests to Nigeria. The first asked for emergency Nigerian air support to dislodge soldiers who had seized the national television station. The second requested Nigerian ground forces to protect constitutional institutions and contain the armed groups. President Bola Tinubu, who chairs ECOWAS, immediately ordered the Nigerian Air Force to deploy fighter jets into Benin's airspace. Nigerian fighter jets took control of Benin's skies, conducting surveillance and rapid intervention operations coordinated with Beninese forces. The presence of Nigerian air power overhead was decisive. Nigerian ground troops crossed from Ikorodu, Badagry, and Owood in Ogun State, entering Benin to support the counter-coup effort. By 11:09 a.m., just over 6 hours after the attack began, Benin's Interior Minister Alassane Saidu announced on Facebook that loyalist forces had successfully thwarted the coup. Loyalist troops backed by Nigerian air and ground support had retaken the television station and were hunting down the mutineers. By Sunday evening, the situation was completely under control. At least 14 people were arrested, including 12 active-duty soldiers. Lieutenant Colonel Pascal Tigre and several men remained fugitives. By Monday morning, Ivorian soldiers arrived in Cotonou. ECOWAS deployed a regional standby force including troops from Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, and Ghana. The African Union and UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres condemned the coup attempt. President Tinubu praised Nigeria's armed forces. Today, the Nigerian armed forces stood gallantly as a defender and protector of constitutional order in the Republic of Benin. They have helped stabilize a neighboring country and have made us proud. On the surface, this looked like a clear victory for democracy. ECOWAS had successfully protected a member state from unconstitutional change. Nigeria demonstrated regional leadership. the international community celebrated. But 850 kilometers north, in Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Nivi, the capitals of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, leaders of the Alliance of Sahel States watched with fury. In January 2024, following military coups in all three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger withdrew from ECOWAS. They accused the bloc of failing to support them against jihadist terrorism, imposing harmful sanctions after their coups, and being a tool of Western interference. In September 2024, they formalized the Alliance of Sahel States, with shared defense commitments, a common passport, and coordinated foreign policy. The AES represents an ideological break from ECOWAS and Western influence. All three expelled French troops, ended military cooperation with France, and partnered with Russia for security. They view ECOWAS as a neo-colonial tool serving Western interests. When Nigeria deployed jets and troops to Benin to stop the coup, the AES didn't see it as defending democracy. They saw it as ECOWAS aggressively intervening to stop a popular uprising against a pro-Western leader. They saw Nigerian military aircraft flying over West African airspace on intervention missions as a direct threat to their sovereignty. Which brings us to December 8, 2025. A Nigerian Air Force C-130 transport aircraft was flying over Burkina Faso when it experienced what Nigeria described as a technical problem, forcing an emergency landing. The plane diverted to Bobo Dioulasso Airport in southwestern Burkina Faso. On board were 2 crew members and 9 passengers, all military personnel, totaling 11 Nigerian soldiers. According to the Nigerian Air Force, the aircraft had a legitimate technical emergency and followed standard aviation safety procedures. The NAF stated that the crew is safe and have received cordial treatment from the host authorities, and that plans were underway to resume the mission to Portugal as scheduled. But according to the Alliance of Sahel States, something very different happened. In a joint statement released by Mali's junta leader Assimi Goïta on behalf of the AES, the Confederation stated, "An aircraft belonging to the Air Force of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, type C-130, was forced to land today, December 8, 2025, in Bobo Dioulasso, Burkina Faso, following an in-flight emergency while operating in Burkinabe airspace. An investigation was immediately opened by the competent Burkinabe authorities and revealed that this military aircraft had no authorization to overfly Burkinabe territory." The AES statement continued. The Confederation of Sahel States condemns in the strongest possible terms this violation of its airspace and of the sovereignty of its member states. Measures have been taken to ensure the security of the confederal airspace, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of its member states, and the safety of the populations of the AES Confederation. Then came the threat. The air and anti-aircraft defenses of the confederal airspace, placed on maximum alert, have been authorized to neutralize any aircraft that violates confederal airspace. Authorized to neutralize means shoot down. The Alliance of Sahel States just announced that their air defense systems have standing orders to shoot down any aircraft entering their airspace without authorization. Military aircraft, civilian aircraft, aircraft from Nigeria, ECOWAS states, France, any nation they consider a threat. Burkina Faso's Territorial Administration Minister Emile Zerbo confirmed the 11 Nigerian military officers were detained and that the aircraft entered Burkina Faso's airspace without authorization.
Any aircraft that violates the airspace of the Alliance of all Sahel States will be neutralized or detained. The sovereignty of our states is non-negotiable. Burkina Faso's actions towards Nigerian Air Force are legitimate and necessary. We must remain vigilant against external provocations and attempts at destabilization.
Multiple Burkinabe security sources told BBC the crew was held for questioning. As of December 9th, reports indicate the soldiers were released and given permission to fly back to Nigeria, but the political damage is done. The timing is not coincidental. A Nigerian military aircraft flying over Burkina Faso without authorization just happened to occur less than 24 hours after Nigeria deployed jets and troops to stop a coup in Benin. The AES clearly views these events as connected. They see Nigerian military aircraft moving freely across West African airspace conducting intervention operations, and they're drawing a red line. The question everyone is asking, was this really just an emergency landing, or was the Nigerian aircraft conducting surveillance related to the Benin intervention? We may never know. What we know is that the incident has dramatically escalated tensions between Nigeria/ECOWAS and the Alliance of Sahel States. This crisis reveals a fundamental fracture in West African unity. For decades, ECOWAS represented regional integration and cooperation. Member states shared a common market, allowed visa-free travel, coordinated security, and intervened collectively to defend democracy. That model has collapsed. West Africa is now split into two competing blocs with incompatible visions. On one side, ECOWAS, led by Nigeria, representing 12 countries committed to democratic governance, market integration, and maintaining relationships with Western partners while pursuing African agency. On the other side, the Alliance of Sahel States, representing Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, committed to military governance during transition periods, breaking away from Western influence entirely, partnering with Russia for security, and rejecting ECOWAS interference. In January 2025, the AES officially completed its withdrawal from ECOWAS after a year of failed reconciliation. ECOWAS tried to maintain duty-free trade, visa-free movement, and residence rights, but the AES has been dismantling these connections. In April 2025, the AES imposed a 0.5% import duty on goods from ECOWAS states, contradicting the free trade agreement. They've announced plans for a common AES currency to replace the West African CFA franc. They're building parallel institutions to replace every ECOWAS function. And now, with this airspace crisis, the split is becoming militarized. The AES has announced its entire confederal airspace is now a no-fly zone for unauthorized aircraft, with air defense systems on maximum alert and authorization to shoot down violators. Nigerian military aircraft, ECOWAS intervention forces, and potentially civilian aircraft could be targeted if they cross AES airspace without permission. Think about the implications. Nigeria shares a border with Niger. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger share borders with multiple ECOWAS states. If AES airspace becomes a militarized no-fly zone, it fundamentally changes how Nigeria and ECOWAS can operate. Military interventions like the one in Benin become infinitely more complicated if Nigerian jets can't safely fly over Niger or Burkina Faso. Humanitarian operations become dangerous. Commercial aviation becomes risky. The entire architecture of West African regional cooperation collapses. Russia has been the primary security partner for all three AES states since they expelled French forces. Wagner Group mercenaries, now reorganized as Africa Corps, operate in all three countries. Russian military advisors train AES forces. Russian weapons and air defense systems are being deployed. The authorization to shoot down aircraft entering AES airspace likely includes Russian-supplied surface-to-air missiles and anti-aircraft systems operated by Russian-trained personnel. France has been completely pushed out of the Sahel. French military bases have closed. French troops have withdrawn. French development aid has been rejected. The AES views France as the ultimate neo-colonial power, and they see Nigerian intervention in Benin as serving French interests by protecting a pro-French government. For ordinary West Africans, this crisis is a disaster. The ECOWAS region was built on free movement, allowing citizens to travel, work, and trade across borders without restriction. Millions depend on cross-border commerce. Families are split across borders. Students attend universities in neighboring countries. All of this becomes threatened when airspace is militarized, borders are hardened, and armed conflict looms. The economic impact is already being felt. Investors are nervous. Trade routes are disrupted. Airlines are reassessing flight paths to avoid AES airspace. The fragmentation undermines economic integration for 400 million people. The security implications are worse. Jihadist groups operating across the Sahel have exploited state collapse and regional divisions for years. When neighboring countries can't cooperate on security, when intelligence sharing breaks down, when military coordination becomes impossible, terrorists thrive. The fracture between ECOWAS and AES creates exactly the security vacuum jihadist groups exploit. So where does this go? In the best case, Nigeria and the AES find a diplomatic solution. Nigeria apologizes for the airspace violation, explains it was a genuine emergency, and commits to requesting authorization for future flights. The AES accepts the explanation, and both sides agree to formal protocols. Tensions de-escalate. But this requires both sides to prioritize de-escalation over pride. President Tinubu cannot appear weak after defending Benin's democracy. AES leaders cannot back down after publicly threatening to shoot down aircraft. Both sides have boxed themselves into positions that make compromise difficult. In the worst scenario, another Nigerian aircraft crosses AES airspace. AES air defenses engage. A Nigerian plane is shot down. Nigerian soldiers are killed. Nigeria retaliates. ECOWAS mobilizes. The AES invokes its Mutual Defense Pact. Russia backs the AES. the region descends into armed conflict. The most likely scenario: Nigeria and the AES maintain hostile relations with minimal communication. Nigerian aircraft avoid AES airspace entirely, limiting Nigeria's ability to project power. ECOWAS interventions become logistically impossible without overflying AES territory. The two blocs coexist in a Cold War, with periodic incidents that never quite explode but prevent cooperation. This Cold War scenario condemns West Africa to indefinite division. Regional integration stops. Economic cooperation stalls. Security coordination collapses. Jihadist groups expand. Development suffers. The detained Nigerian aircraft in Burkina Faso is more than a diplomatic incident. It's a symbol of how far West Africa has fractured. It represents the collapse of the regional order that was supposed to make African solutions to African problems possible. For Nigeria, this tests whether President Tinubu can defend Nigerian interests while avoiding disastrous conflict. For the AES, this tests whether their vision of sovereignty can coexist with regional cooperation. For ECOWAS, this challenges the organization's fundamental purpose. What started with a coup attempt in Benin on December 7th became a Nigerian intervention to defend democracy. That intervention led to a detained aircraft in Burkina Faso on December 8th. That detention led to a threat to shoot down future aircraft. And now, West Africa sits on the brink of its worst crisis in a generation. Was this really just an emergency landing, or something more calculated? Was the AES reaction proportionate or a deliberate escalation? These questions matter less than the fundamental reality. West Africa is fracturing, and this incident might be remembered as the moment when fracture became irreversible.